Raimundo, a 74-year-old man, found himself on a hospital bed surrounded by the characteristic sounds of monitoring machines and whispered conversations in the hallways. He was admitted to San Vicente Hospital, a renowned private clinic for the treatment of heart failure and leprosy patients. Raimundo's leprosy was not as severe. Gradually, it was being cured. His hospitalization had already lasted a week, and the medical costs were accumulating at a rate that the hospital found concerning. The numbers exceeded the administration's comfort margin. 3 doctors, Dr. 1, Sarah, and Peter, responsible for Mr. Raimundo's case, after much discussion, entered the room where he was with serious and cold expressions. "Mr. Raimundo, unfortunately, your supply has run out by now. We haven't seen the promised payment you said you would make," complained one, looking at the chart but avoiding direct eye contact with the patient. The wrinkled face of the gentleman bore signs of concern. His hand trembled as he adjusted his glasses before responding. "I understand, doctors, I really do, but I've already said the payment will be made soon. My son will take care of it. He's a bit busy with work, but he'll come soon," Mr. Raimundo said. Sarah, the least patient of the trio, crossed her arms. "Mr. Raimundo, we understand that complicated situations can arise, but the hospital is a business and others also need treatment. Your stay is occupying a bed that could be used by someone capable of paying. I just ask for a little more time," pleaded the elderly man. "Just one more week. I'm sure my son will sort everything out by then." The doctors exchanged skeptical glances among themselves. Finally, Peter, who had remained silent until then, said, "Here's what we'll do, Mr. Raimundo. We'll give you an additional week. If payment isn't made, we'll have to take drastic measures. It's not something we want to do, but we have our own responsibilities here." Raimundo agreed, feeling a mixture of relief and fear. "Thank you, doctors. 1 week will be enough." The doctors left the room with expressions on their faces still full of doubt and frustration. Every step they took out of the room sounded like a failure, as they could have been earning a high commission if it weren't for that man's delay in paying what they owed. In contrast, for Mr. Raimundo, anguish settled in his hospital bed. The elderly man was left alone with his thoughts and hopes that somehow everything would be resolved. The following week would be one of the longest of his life. The doctors were very irritated because Mr. Raimundo Gonzalez had been admitted to San Vicente Hospital exactly 1 week before the tense conversation they had that day. He arrived alone, a little unsteady, feeling immense chest pain, wearing ordinary clothes and an old worn-out hat. His appearance caused immediate discomfort among the reception staff and nearby doctors. "They sure want to see this old man," whispered a nurse. "Dr. 1 doesn't seem to be happy. A typical patient of our clinic." The man looked at the elderly man and then at the hospital's nameplate, recalling the reputation the establishment needed to maintain. "It's complicated, but we can't just ignore him. Imagine if this leaks to the media. It'll be very bad for us." Therefore, Raimundo was accepted for the treatment of heart failure and to treat his body's disease. From day 1, he repeated the same story. "My son will pay. I promise. He has a good job. You'll see." The 3 doctors taking care of the old man's case couldn't take it anymore. He didn't pay, but they also couldn't simply expel the poor man. As the days went by, their patience began to wear thin. His stay was becoming a financial problem for the hospital and, consequently, an obstacle to their own commissions. "We have to get this old man out of here. He comes, uses our services, and doesn't pay. That's very unfair. The payment, which is good, didn't come. We're losing money with him here," Peter vented in a private meeting with the other 2 colleagues. Sarah rolled her eyes. "Look at him, he's a fraud. He doesn't seem to have money. I'm sure he's tricking us." It was at this moment that one had the idea to investigate Raimundo. "You know what? I'm going to find out more about this old man. Something in this story doesn't add up. How does he have so much money and a wealthy son, and no one shows up in a week?" He grabbed his tablet and started typing Raimundo Gonzalez's name. After a few minutes of research in public records and social networks, the information came clear as day. "He's nothing like he says. He doesn't have any son. That filthy old man has been lying to us all this time," exclaimed one, tossing the device onto the table with an expression of indignation and betrayal. The other doctors looked at each other, now with an uncomfortable certainty on their faces. "We'll have to handle this the right way," said Peter. The three doctors, with cold expressions, entered the old man's room. The old man, who until then maintained an innocent, carefree smile, could feel the noticeable change in the atmosphere. "Good morning, how are you today? What a wonderful day, don't you think?" He tried to greet them, but was immediately interrupted. "Mr. Gonzalez, you have 1 day to pay for all the treatment you received here. Otherwise, we'll be forced to call the police and report you for fraud," announced Dr. One, staring directly into the old man's eyes. Raimundo's face paled, his eyes began to tremble, denoting a mixture of confusion and terror. "But I'm not lying, friends. I have a son, he will pay, I promise." However, his speech was slow, his expression somewhat confused, making his honesty even harder to discern. The group of doctors shook hands and left the room, leaving a heavy silence there. They didn't want to know what the old man would do, they just wanted to see if he would get the money. The next day, he arrived as expected, without making any payment. The three patients had run out. They simply called the hospital guards, who entered Raimundo's room with professional coldness. "Please, doctors, I beg you, why are you doing this?" said the old man, tears beginning to stream down his wrinkled face. There was no response, just a gesture from the doctors for the guards to continue. The old man was dragged through the corridors, his cry echoing in a painful echo that penetrated the rooms and halls he passed through. "My son, please, he will come," he tried to exclaim, while the medical staff and patients who witnessed the scene had varied reactions. Some were absorbed, while others agreed with the action. After all, San Vicente was an institution for people of high financial status, and rules were rules. The automatic doors opened, and the old man was literally thrown out of the hospital. The sky was gray, and a light rain began to fall, soaking the man who was now homeless and without care. "This is a hospital, not a charity organization," Peter said, watching the man outside. "He got what he deserved." "We can't afford to keep liars here," Sarah added. One, the last to speak, barely nodded, but something in his eyes revealed a shadow of doubt, a questioning of whether what they did was justifiable in any ethical or moral system. Meanwhile, done is done. The trio walked away, leaving behind not only Raimundo, but also a piece of the humanity each of them carried. The rain increased its pace, as if trying to wash away the scene that had just unfolded. A week after the incident with the elderly man, San Vicente Hospital began a series of calamities. Was there any relationship between them? First, an urgent call came from the supply management. The main supplier had abruptly discontinued all stock of broad-spectrum antibiotics, essential for the treatment of a variety of infections. "This is impossible," exclaimed the administrative manager as he checked the spreadsheets on his computer. "We're in compliance with all contracts and service conditions." However, a few hours later, another call came, this time from the health department. The regulatory body informed that the hospital no longer had the necessary certification to perform organ transplants, one of the most profitable and essential services they offered. Furthermore, an audit of the hospital's accounts was pending, based on some financial discrepancies that the hospital managers refused to clarify over the phone. After days of watching the ship sink, they immediately called a meeting and included all departments and, of course, doctors and other staff. The conference room was tense, charged with a mixture of confusion, anger, and fear. "Thank you all for coming," began George, the CEO of the establishment. "Well, I'll get straight to the point. Everyone knows the disaster that has befallen us, right? But I want to say that we've discovered what happened with our suppliers and the reason we're in this situation." Everyone sat in their seats, all eyes fixed on the man, as if trying to read the answer in his expression before he verbalized it. "What's going on?" they murmured. Then he said, "We've received communications from our suppliers and also from the health department. The only requirement for us to return to normal is to fire Dr. One, Dr. Peter, and Dr. Sarah," he concluded, looking directly at the doctors in question. Three of them opened their eyes in disbelief. "How?" asked one of the doctors, in a single terrified sound. But before they could formulate another question or even fully process the information, George continued. "To be clear, we're not just talking about a recommendation, we're talking about a contractual stipulation that was activated due to our failure to maintain ethical and patient care standards, and all of this was traced back to the incident involving Mr. Raimundo Gonzalez." A deafening silence filled the room. The doctors in question realized, in a moment of brutal clarity, that their actions had consequences far beyond what they could have imagined. It wasn't just with one patient that they had failed, it was with the hospital itself, their colleagues, and, in a broader sense, the entire community they served. That's it. You have until the end of the day to clear your desks and hand in your credentials, George concluded, ending the meeting. And indeed, the careers of the three doctors at San Vicente Hospital, Juan, Peter, and Sarah, were stunned, trying to process the man's words. "Wait, please, what happened? What did we do wrong?" exclaimed Dr. Juan, his voice trembling. George looked sternly and said they had kicked out Raimundo Gonzalez and that his son was furious and demanded that the administration admit them. Otherwise, he would use his influence to shut down the hospital. A chill ran down the spines of the three doctors. So it was true. He had a son, murmured the doctor, feeling a lump in her throat. But who will be this son, they seemed to ask. Nobody investigated, and he didn't even have a son, said Peter, confused and frightened. That's it, sighed George, and then everything came to light. It turns out that Raimundo Gonzalez adopted a baby, raised him alone. He never registered the child, and that's why his son has the name Mario Brune, the same as the mother who gave birth very young and had no way to raise him. But Gonzalez took care of him like a son, and Mario grew up to become a very successful businessman in the luxury car industry. He owns Brune Automotive. The doctor's eyes widened. Obviously, they already knew the reputation of this car industry. It was everyone's dream. As the story unfolded, they became even more frightened. The man continued explaining that Raimundo started suffering from mental retardation due to age and suddenly became leprous. Mario traveled for work and left his father under the care of a caregiver. But at a moment when she went out to do something and left the old man alone in the mansion's room, the old man had a lapse and wandered away from home, started to have chest pains, falling right in front of the hospital. Mario was paying for an expensive treatment to treat Raimundo's disease, and gradually, it was flowing. They had no choice but to welcome him. However, they needed payment. The elderly man had been hospitalized for a week, and the staff didn't know where he was from or who to call, as the old man arrived without any of this information and didn't remember. He went on to say that his son would pay the bills because he knew Mario would show up. But nobody believed him and nobody gave him a chance. George paused for the information to sink in. The caregiver was shocked when she realized Raimundo had disappeared and immediately called her son, a search team. After you ridiculously and cruelly expelled him, he wandered the streets, and the rescue team finally found him. When Mario learned what had happened to his father under our care, he was furious, bought this hospital, and demanded that you be fired. If we don't agree, he has the means to cut supplier by supplier until bankrupting us. The silence in the room was heavy. The doctors were surprised, looking at each other and then at the CEO, as if expecting him to say it was all a tasteless joke. But the expression on his face left no doubt. That's it. You have until the end of the day to clear your desks and hand in your credentials, concluded George, ending the conversation. The three were speechless. However, when they came into contact with reality, they panicked, grabbed the CEO's shirt, and begged for mercy. No, Mr. George, please, we can't be fired. This job is our life. With red faces and eyes already filled with tears, the doctors received a severe reprimand from the hospital managers. Do you want to know the truth? You're a disgrace to this profession, he shouted. Nobody, absolutely nobody, should be treated the way you treated Raimundo Gonzalez. Medicine is a humanitarian field, and your rotten action contradicts all the ethical and moral principles of this profession. They felt every word as a blow. Please, give us another chance, sir. We will do everything to correct our mistake, begged Sarah, trembling. It's out of the question. The decision has already been made. Gather your things, George replied, with a look that left no room for negotiation. The trio, after the shame of collecting their belongings, was escorted by guards out of the hospital, passing through corridors where other healthcare professionals looked at them with disdain and disapproval. Every step was a humiliation, every glance a condemnation. However, the worst was yet to come. When the doors opened, at that moment, Mario Brune and his father, Mr. Raimundo, were there waiting. The businessman had a face of hatred, with an expression of contained fury. He looked at those three heartless people and said, "No, you are not worthy of being called doctors. What you did to my father is unforgivable. I hope you learn about this for the rest of your lives." They had no words, only bowed heads and heavy hearts of guilt. They left, each absorbed in their own world of shame and regret. However, a new era began for the hospital under Mario Brune's ownership. New guidelines focused on empathy, dignity, and patient rights were implemented. An ethics committee was established to ensure that everyone was treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their financial or social condition. From now on, let these three serve as an example. If you don't want to have the same fate, treat our patients well. After news of the doctor's dismissal spread, several reports emerged of other patients who were also treated abusively and humiliatingly by them. With the removal of these toxic individuals, the establishment began to flourish as a true place of health. Now it was a place where everyone, from the wealthy businessman to the homeless, could receive medical treatment with dignity and respect. Mario insisted on investing in better facilities and equipment, but most importantly in staff training and development, ensuring that the hospital's culture truly changed. The case of the elderly man who was kicked out of that place became a reminder that the true essence of medicine lies in caring, empathy, human care, that every life matters. And for Juan, Peter, and Sarah, it became a harsh but necessary lesson that they would have to carry for the rest of their lives, wherever they went. Friend, if you liked this story, remember to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends and family. Thanks to all who watched us here, and before leaving the video, comment on what you thought down here. See you soon with new exciting stories. A big hug, and God bless you.